Hey, everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. I am Austin Ward, and this is a real live practice report brought to you by Byers Auto. We were not in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Friday morning, but the Buckeyes were. First one of the 15 scheduled practices here in March and April. Ryan Day leading that group out there. And then afterwards, we got an update, we the media, from Kerry Combs, taking a lot of responsibility, putting it on his shoulders for any defensive issues a year ago. Kevin Wilson talking a little bit about what the offensive structure will look like for the quarterbacks and the offensive line primarily. And then Zach Harrison and Thayer Munford, a couple of guys that you can now pencil in as likely captains for the Buckeyes. We're going to get into all that here on this practice report brought to you by Byers Auto with Tim May and Spencer Holbrook joining me. I am Austin Ward. Tim, when you listen to all four of those guys this morning talking about practice number one, what's the first thing that jumped out at you?
I sneakily tried to ask Thayer Munford, who was the quarterback that took the field with the first string, and he give him credit, man. Well, I'm not giving him credit. I wanted a straight answer, but he gave me the diplomatic answer that all three of those guys are looking really good. And of course, we're talking about C.J. Stroud, Jack Miller, and the McCord kid out of Pennsylvania, new to campus. But looks like he's in there, throwing haymakers. He wants to play. And the other thing, Zach Harrison. We heard about Zach Harrison being maybe one of the standouts, if not the standout of the winter workouts. And I asked him, what's different about you even in practice right now? Are you more savage, whatever, and he just basically said he's going as hard as he can every play. That's what he's Chase Young playbook. But the main thing is he wants to be Zach Harrison. He wants to maybe live up to the hype, it sounds like. So I think that's encouraging news for the Buckeyes. You guys can talk about the two coaches. I can chime in on that too, but I took that as much as anything. If Zach Harrison steps up his game, and then you got maybe the best two tackle tandem maybe in college football, and Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Frere returning, you got the makings there on the lines, and we all know that's where it gets started.
I think that, accountability is sort of that buzzword from the people that we talked about today. Yep. They all mention it in some form or fashion as it relates to Zach Harrison. He's not in the dark that last year was not a five-star number one player, number one recruit in the country type of year. It wasn't a Chase Young, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa type of year. And he also talked about the jump that Tommy Togiai made when he fully invested. 1 year later, that could change your life. Yeah. And now Zach Harrison has been in this program for 2 years. Year three, if he makes that same jump, given the potential he has, you're talking about life-changing money. You're also talking about someone, Spencer, who could make the difference in this pass rush where we've indicated a lot. Pressure's fine, but strip sacks are better. And that's sort of that next step because they're, as effective as that rush was from the Rushmen last year, they didn't have that superstar really, and Zach Harrison could become that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if anybody expects Zach Harrison to become Chase Young because we have to kind of remember just how good Chase Young was. It's almost impossible to be what Chase Young was. But if there's one guy who can do it, it is Zach Harrison. The reach, the body build, the way that he moves, he has that ability. And if he is actually living up to what the coaches are saying about him right now, what he's saying about himself and dedicating himself, it is going to be a very, very long year for Big Ten offenses around the league. And then once they get into the playoff or wherever, it's going to be dangerous for offenses because this guy is a guy who has all the potential in the world. I know how much Berm talked about how he was a raw prospect coming out of high school. It wasn't, people who knew never expected him to be dominant right out of the gate, but we didn't expect him to also look that way as a sophomore. So if he takes that next step, I think he has a chance to be an All-American, a first-round pick, all of the things he was supposed to be when he came to Ohio State. He's got that chance this year.
Can I interject one thing too? It's like in Zach, even when he was asked to compare himself to those other three guys we were talking about, the two Bosa brothers, and then Chase Young, he's a different physically built guy than those three guys are. Yeah. And they're all three different. Even the two Bosa brothers are different. And, his point is he wants to be the best Zach Harrison he can be. And it might, if you study him, he looks more rangy, you know what I mean? We've all seen he's got great speed and stuff, and now he's trying to incorporate, for want of another term, that get off, that really sets Chase Young and the Bosa brothers apart, in my opinion, from anybody I've seen the last several years, is that get off coming off the line. And I know that's as much of Zach Harrison's focus as anything else this spring.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison, and I know that Zach Harrison purposely tried to avoid that.
Yeah,
I think we're going to look at those three guys. I mean, Zach Harrison and Chase Young both did this where they were running track. Like, these guys are incredibly gifted athletes and have more speed than any defensive end ever should. That was certainly not the strength of Joey or Nick Bosa. So, that's probably the path you go down. And if Chase Young went through this as well, first year growing, second year putting on some more strength, learning what it's like. He dealt with injuries, just to go way back and talk about it. But it's hard to hold up physically at that position when he used to be able to just run right around people and get to the quarterback. Well, that's not going to happen in the Big Ten. It's not going to happen in a college football playoff, and it's definitely not going to happen in the NFL. So you have to learn how to use that toolkit, and you have to just physically develop. And that's one of the things that Zach Harrison talked about. I mean, if Mickey Marotti is saying that you're one of the hardest workers in this program, that bodes pretty well for the future. Tim, dive into the situation there for Kerry Combs. He made this point that they won a lot of games. They created a lot of turnovers. Also, not excusing this number that we brought up a lot, number 122, but the opportunity just to have one-on-one drills during practice. He said that they went back and counted 7 times they got to do it last year. Not enough. And again, not making excuses, just context.
Yeah, and people don't want to hear excuses, but there are reasons for a lot of things. One of which is, when you look at just the number of games Alabama played last year compared to Ohio State, the experience just from the gameplay, I think it showed dramatically in that championship game. But then when you add in there, like you just pointed out, you documented this all through the season last year, just like Spence did, and like I talked about on my podcast and wrote a few times about just the guys they lost hither, thither, and yon from that secondary rotation. Starting with 2 guys getting kicked off the team in the spring and right on down the line, and then the guys they lost from injury. You're not making excuses, but there are reasons why you didn't necessarily see the development in that defensive secondary like you would like to have seen. I think one of the most encouraging things I heard today, though, from Kerry Combs is, Josh Proctor is the number 1 free safety right now. They want him to play ball. You know what I mean? They want to set him loose. That wasn't the case necessarily at the beginning of the year last year. You know what I'm talking about. And, I've been banging Josh Proctor's drum ever since he built it, and so we'll see where that leads. But we're all interested into seeing who's going to rise to be that other corner. It's going to be Cam Brown. It's going to be another young guy, Lathan Ransom. They've got him in the safety area. We all saw him develop a little bit last year. But my point is, teams, it's like when you stub your toe, you keep stubbing that same toe. That's what happened to Ohio State last year, and it's pass coverage. I do believe it's pass defense. Like you pointed out many times, 122 in the country is not acceptable. Yeah, you lose one game, but that one game exploited the one area on that defense that really needed shoring up, and they never really got it done last year.
Well, and I think that, one advantage is we're talking about it with a full strength roster. Kerry Combs gets to decide where Josh Proctor plays best, and Josh Proctor gets to be comfortable there. We saw him play in the slot. We saw him line up as a cornerback at times. He had to go back and play in the box against the run, and he barely ever got to just play a true free safety because they needed him in so many other places. Marcus Williamson, he's got real value to this team, but it is not at safety. Okay, that was the situation they had to be in, and so you had to decide, well, what's the best? Josh Proctor can help us here. He might do that better than maybe Marcus Williamson could. Well, that creates other problems elsewhere. If you say right now in spring, Josh Proctor, you are the free safety. You're going to be the free safety until you can't play anymore. Okay, well, now you find, here's where Lathan Ransom works best. He's going to be in that, as Kerry Combs described it, the cover safety. So he's going to do a little bit more of that. Josh Proctor could do that, but that athleticism, you want him to be that ball hawk in center field. Okay, well, then you build from there. Then you work on your corners. Then you find that slot guy. Everything trickles down. I think last year we talked about the loss of Jordan Fuller, maybe not getting as much attention. Well, now you actually get to designate somebody to do that. And if it's Josh Proctor, Spencer, I think Ohio State's better off for it.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this team last year, a slot corner, we can say this with confidence, a slot corner was playing outside corner. A safety was playing slot corner. A freshman was playing safety sometimes. Like, this team just was not – it was a little discombobulated at times in the secondary. I think once you set that first piece, the biggest piece, that safety who you have confidence in and who you show confidence in. So even when he makes a mistake, you still have that confidence in him and you don't start rotating guys around. If you put Josh Proctor in that spot and say, this spot is yours, you build around that and you find guys that fit what he does in the secondary well, and you start to find the chess pieces that go where they need to go, your secondary is just going to be better by default, because once you have that safety locked in at that spot, the rest of the pieces just kind of fall into place. And I think there's a couple corners that are going to take the reins and really make an impact on the team, but it all starts with Josh Proctor.
Hey, but real quick, I'm going to talk about this on my podcast next week with you, Awesome, is you still want Josh Proctor running around with a 2x4 in his hand back there, though. You know, you can't take that aggression. I mean, even in this age where you can't really hit people like the old days, he still brings the wood, man, when he comes flying up, and you don't want to take that. So I'm curious, man. This was just a little bit of a looking glass into what we may be seeing some changes, maybe a little bit philosophically, in what Ohio State's going to be doing in the fall.
Yeah, it's going to be, for one day, sometimes you make some sweeping conclusions, but, talking about Latham Ransom being there, I mean, I think that there's a lot that you can glean from that from day one. Now, the other reason that you maybe can't get too far down the road, Court Williams is going to be part of this plan for Ohio State by the fall. Cameron Brown, he's going to face some competition. Spencer alluded to this. Ryan Watts, Legend Cavazos, some other guys in the mix there, younger guys getting in, when they arrive. Jordan Hancock.
Hey, let me interrupt you. Isn't it amazing those names you just named off, though? I mean, raw material.
The talent is not the problem for this team, but they didn't have the full complement of that talent available last year.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of the fact. We can talk more about that as it goes along, but that, I think, learning about the safety spot from Kerry Combs was meaningful. On offense, it's alluded to one of your bold predictions there, Tim, with Paris Johnson kicking in the guard. He has to be in that best five, which I think that's been the mixing and match. It's fair to know who four of them are. Harry Miller is going to be the center for this team. I think he will really benefit from a full year of actually getting to snap. Forget about the Michigan State game. I'm sure that he has already. And then, Ohio State still has plenty of confidence in him to handle that job. Nicholas Petit-Frere, Thayer Munford, Paris Johnson. And then you have a pretty wide open battle there for that last guard spot. I know you like DeJuan Jones there, Tim. We'll see how that plays out. But again, Kevin Wilson was talking about just finding five, and then can work out from there.
Yeah, it was interesting that Thayer Munford basically said that indicated that Matt Jones, who started 3 games last year at guard, when he started having those problems with COVID late in the year, especially maybe having some, personal problems he's having to deal with and stuff, which I think opens the door for somebody. A guy that, and it's not just because I love his name, but a guy that I just keep playing in my head about is Enoch Vimahi. Everything you've heard about him is he is so much different physically than he was, when he showed up at Ohio State. And there's a guy that could really be, pardon the expression, knocking on the door, of playing. And I think the competition on that offensive line is going to be extremely interesting. Max Ray played some last year. I thought was credible in his one start, but there's another guy. We wrote about this. You've talked about this. You and Spence have too, that, I think the depth is as good as it's ever been on the offensive line in the last, maybe the last 20 years, as far as physically capable people. And like I had Jim Lachey on my podcast, and he was talking about, that line I proposed of Munford, DeJuan Jones, Harry Miller, Paris Johnson Jr., and Nicholas Petit-Frere. Dude, that's a mountain range. That's, you don't see those very often still, even in major college football. If they can put that mountain range on the field, guys who have played, who've shown ability, some of them, quite a few of them, most of them 5 stars. I think it bodes well. You agree, don't you?
Spencer, that sounds like a possible Joe Moore Award unit winner.
Well, I think I do have a little bit of rebuttal to Tim, because I just think there's a guy everybody keeps forgetting about that came in as a really high rated center. And if the mold holds true at Ohio State, you go from guard to center to the NFL. Yeah. Harry Miller's from guard to center. I look at a guy like Luke Whippler, who has all the talent in the world, has all the smarts in the world, already knows what he's doing at center, was the backup center last year. at times, I think Luke Whippler has a chance to take that guard spot if he has a good spring, and then transition that into a center job down the road for Ohio State.
Let me interrupt you. Does he have a chance to take that center job and leave Harry Miller at guard? I mean,
any
you know what I'm saying?
way to get the best 5 on the field.
Yeah.
I just think the guy that we keep overlooking, or maybe even just because he's a second-year guy and we just like to look at the veterans on that line, Luke Whippler has a chance to really take the reins of that spot.
Yeah, it's to answer, Tim's hypothetical there. Yeah, it's possible. I just Harry Miller, when you just look at him, I think Berm and I were having this conversation late last year. If you were creating somebody to go play Madden or we get NCAA football back, he has every attribute that you could possibly want. Yes, he had snapping issues when he was forced in on short notice in one game last year. This was the number 1 center recruit in the country, 5-star prospect, 2 full years of development with Mickey Marotti. And we've said this before when we're talking about the quarterback, Spencer, like, does the 1 year between them make any difference? I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to get our eyes on what Luke Whippler looks like heading into this year and this offseason. But, man, to me, that's a tall order for Harry Miller to not be the center. But Luke Whippler will be next in line and ready. We got a lot more we can talk about as this spring rolls along. But we're going to cut this practice report right now before we truly go off the rails. It's been brought to you by Byers Auto. Tim May podcast will be out on Tuesday, where I'm guessing we're going to talk a lot more about what we heard, and we'll also hear from Ryan Day again on Monday as spring camp gets rolling. We could probably do this for about 2 hours because we're so excited to have football to talk about again here at Lettermen Row.
Yes.
That's the May and Spencer Holbrook. I am Austin Ward. This has been the practice report brought to you by Byers Auto. Stay with us for full coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes all year at LettermenRow.com.